Hey, you're watching NASA TV, on the air and online every day, on this planet and beyond.
Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston Station, ready for the event.
Coconino High School, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Coconino High School. How do you hear me?
I have you loud and clear. It's nice to talk to you today.
Good morning. My name is Christine Sapio. I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona with 600 students who are eager to learn about your experiences on the space station. Here comes our first question.
Hi, my name is Simon and I'm a student at D. McGill Elementary. My question is, does the International Space Station move due to the Earth's gravity or does it need to propel itself?
Well, that's a great first question because it basically is the same question as how did we get up here on the International Space Station? So the International Space Station is a giant international science laboratory that was put together by a lot of different countries. We're about 250 miles off of the surface of the Earth. So when you think about 250 miles, it's really not that far. You could drive that in your car in about 6 hours. But to get from the surface of the Earth up to a 250-mile orbit, you need to hit escape velocity to get out of the Earth's gravity. And so the first thing we have to do is accelerate to about 7 miles per second. And then the velocity that we are going forward is determined by the orbit that we want to go in. So objects that are moving faster are at a higher orbit or further from Earth, and objects that are slower are a little bit closer. And so we are going about 17,500 miles an hour. And so you can imagine if we had to propel ourselves at that speed, it would take a lot of fuel. But what an orbit basically is that we are actually free falling toward Earth, but we are matching the curvature of the Earth as we go over it. So if you think about throwing a baseball, if you throw a baseball really gently, it lands not too far away. If you throw it even farther, it goes farther and then it curves back down and hits the Earth, right? So if you threw that baseball hard enough, there is some speed at which its curve back down to the Earth is going to match the curvature of the Earth, and it's just going to free fall around the Earth. So we're just constantly in free fall. And for our orbit at 250 miles above the Earth, it's about 17,500 miles an hour. So no, we don't have to propel ourselves once we get up here, but it took a heck of a lot of fuel to get here.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Casey, and I'm a student at D. McGill Elementary. And my question is it ever hard to get around the spacecraft?
Yeah, I tell you, we make a lot of rookie mistakes when we first get here. And so you can see this is, if I reach my arms out, that's about how wide our walls are. And so if you notice, I can't touch this wall and that one at the same time. So there is a spot right here in the middle where I could actually get stuck not holding anything. And this is one of the early rookie mistakes where we get a little stuck not being able to grab onto anything. But I tell you what's amazing. The human body is amazing and your mind is amazing. And you adapt so quickly to where you are. And, we have these handrails all over the place. And, when you first get here, every time we enter a module, we have multiple different modules, which is what we call our rooms, right? We basically have a lot of different rooms. And when you first get here, when you go into a new room, you want to go, okay, which way is up, which way is down, which way is left and right? Because we're so used to on Earth kind of just subconsciously mapping all of our surroundings like that. But up here, what's really interesting is that after a couple weeks, you don't think that anymore. It's like your brain remaps in 3D, and you don't think about up and down anymore. You know, you kind of twist and loop through the hatches. You know exactly where you're going, which way to turn. You know, instead of looking for up and down, you know, the lights are up and the ground is down. You go, okay, well there's a workbench over here that I'm going that way. And so what's really neat, it's really neat to try to get used to floating. But it's really cool when you've been here so long and you're so adapted that you don't even think about it anymore, you know, and there are days I go through it, just another work day, and, you know, it's the afternoon and I'm just like, wow, wait a minute, I'm still floating.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead.
Do I look at the screen?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. My name is CJ and I'm a student at D. Miguel Elementary. How do you stay safe in space? Thank you.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
The question is, how do you stay safe in space?
Well, so the first way to stay safe, really anywhere that we go, is determining what the risks are. And so, you know, me personally, I don't have to think about it on a daily basis because there is a huge mission control team that has thought about my safety long before I was here. And is monitoring it every single day. However, there are various emergencies that are a pretty big deal up here. One of those is a fire. One of those is really anything to do with our atmosphere, right? The air that we're breathing, that I'm breathing right now, to me it feels a lot like the air on Earth. But this air, it didn't exist up here in space. Like, we had to create it up here. The engineers at NASA had to create this air. And so they know exactly what we need to live, and they are constantly monitoring to make sure that the exact ratios of particles like oxygen and carbon dioxide and other trace contaminants are exactly where we need it to be. And so one of the risks of in spaceflight is if that balance can't be kept, and that could happen if there was a depressurization, if we got a hole in the side of space and we had a depressurization, or if one of our pieces of equipment broke and we weren't able to do that. So the way that we stay safe is understanding the risks and then training for them. And so we spent about 2 years training for this space flight, and we went through simulation after simulation after simulation. And I can tell you, we don't train very much for a normal day. We train for stuff to break. We train for stuff to go wrong. And so training is really the best way that we stay safe. So that's what I can control, is my training. The teams on the ground in Mission Control in Houston, you know, you've probably seen pictures of all the controllers behind their consoles. They are constantly monitoring every threat to us. And so, like I said, the air was one of them. Another thing that they monitor is debris out in space. You know, we're going 17,500 miles an hour. You've probably seen what a rock can do to your windshield when you're going on the freeway at 50 miles an hour. So it can do a lot of damage, and so they actually can track a lot of space debris, and they can move the space station. So that's another way that we keep safe, is our folks on the ground are constantly monitoring 24 hours a day.
Hi, my name is Deontay, and I'm a student at Coconino High School. And my question is, what is the type of science are you doing on the space station?
Yeah, so science is really the key and why we're here. And science is it's so much more. It's based on all the principles that you guys are learning in your science class, but it is applying all of those principles to exploration, to making life on Earth better. And so there's a couple flavors of experiments that we do up here. One of them is outside of the space station. There's a lot of experiments that we never come in physical contact with, but the folks on the ground design them, fly them, use robotics to deploy them. And so, you know, one of those would be the alpha magnetic spectrometer, which is a really long name. We call it the AMS, and it's looking into deep space to look for evidence of antimatter that could tell us, you know, how the universe was formed and how many other galaxies there are. So there's big experiments like that. And then inside the space station, we have human research. So we have research on ourselves and how our bodies adapt to space. And then all of the racks, which is what we call our walls, you know, we have these racks in our walls, all up and down the side of space station are full of experiments. On any one day, there's about 300 experiments going on space station, and we may only touch 2 or 3 of them every day because a lot of them are run remotely on the ground. And I'll tell you, one of the advantages of space experiments is that we can do things up here that we can't do on the ground. One of the big significant things that we can do up here is we can grow crystals for different experiments very well. And so recently we grew protein crystals for research in Parkinson's disease. One of the reasons the scientists on the ground have had trouble learning the pathology of Parkinson's is because they couldn't grow the crystals large enough so that they could investigate it. So what we did up here is we grew the crystals up here, and then we fly them back on a cargo vehicle, and then on the ground they'll be able to look at that. And we're really hopeful that that will lead to a breakthrough in Parkinson's disease. I'm sure a lot of you have been touched by that.
Hi, my name is Skylar, and I'm a student at Coconino High School. What was the training like to become an astronaut?
I tell you, the training to become an astronaut started the day I was born, and I say that in one way because I told my parents when I was just 3 years old that I wanted to be an astronaut. I'm not even sure if I knew what it meant then, but I guess that was just what was in my mind from an early age. You know, and there's kind of the technical side training, and then there's the human interaction and leadership side of the training. So to train for this mission on the technical side, I was selected by NASA in 2013. I was a helicopter test pilot in the Army at the time, and so I was already familiar with flying, just not to space, and certainly not this high. And then starting in 2013, and for 5 years, I was doing the technical training at NASA. So that's learning about the space station, learning about our Soyuz spacecraft that we flew up here, learning about all the systems, learning how to spacewalk, speak Russian, how to, you know, when you think about it, we are on this self-contained little house in the sky, and if anything goes wrong, we need to fix it. So a lot of that training was, you know, how to do plumbing and electricity, and, you know, if we snag and break a wire, how can I fix that wire? So really practical training. So that's the technical side. It was about 5 years. On the interpersonal team side, you know, I've been up here for just over 3 months with 2 other people, and we work with very large teams on the ground. And understanding how to work in teams, how to lead teams in a kind of high-gain, high-risk environment and without getting complacent and being reliable, you know, all of those lessons I learned long before I got to NASA. And, you know, I'm still learning every day. But working with teams all the way from, you know, high school, junior high up to today, all of those experiences really play into our mission now.
Hi, my name is Zachary, and I'm a student at Coconino High School. My question is, how much of what you learned in high school do you actually use?
Well, I'll tell you a secret. I used a larger percentage of what I learned in kindergarten than what I learned in high school. You know, I know how it is sitting in high school, sitting in college, and just going, man, you know, I want to go do all this, and I don't see them sitting down and doing what I'm doing right now. But here's what I kind of figured out. What you're learning in high school is not only the subject material that you're learning, but you are also learning how to learn. And you are demonstrating your maturity and your level of responsibility by how dedicated you are to it. Because one thing I do know is that there's no such thing as smart people. You know, yes, some things come to some people a little bit quicker, but if that is not followed up by hard work and determination and dedication and maturity, then it's not going to go anywhere. And so the biggest thing in high school that you can, you know, don't go to school and think, you know, what am I going to take from today? Go to school and think, I am showing myself off right now. I am showing everybody what my character is. And so the big thing in high school that you can really show and learn how to do is to have the maturity to do what is required of you, because no matter what your job ends up being and no matter what dream you end up pursuing, you're going to have to do things sometimes that you don't like. You know, even in my current job, you know, there's things that I do on certain days that I don't enjoy, but you know, you have to have that maturity. And And learning how to work hard is really big. I'll tell you a real quick story. When I was in college, I was taking a physics class, and this physics class was really hard, and it was known for having the worst tests in the world. And so I was super nervous for it because I knew I wanted to do well. And so about 4 days before it, I started studying like you've never seen before. Like, I don't think I slept for those 4 days. I was up all night. I reworked every single homework problem, every single drill problem. I read every single chapter in the book. I mean, I studied so hard for those 4 days. And when we took that test, I ended up getting just under 100%, and the average grade across all 1,000 cadets at West Point was about a 78. So I was a lot higher than them. And I remember a friend coming up to me and saying, "I wish I was smart so I didn't have to work hard like you." And it was at that moment that I realized, you know what, it's not about being smart. It's about digging deep and studying hard. And I tell you, that is what you can learn in high school. In addition to the subject material, which will be the basis for everything you do, you can learn how to work hard.
Hi, my name is Caleb, and I am a student at Coconino High School. And my question is, what is it like to experience re-entry?
Well, I have flown to space one time, and I have not come home yet, so I'm not really sure. Now, I've heard a lot of stories. You know, anything from the spinny cup at the fair to a roller coaster ride. You know, when you think about it, it's a pretty sporty event, because going from 0 to 17,500 miles an hour was pretty sporty. That took about 8.5 minutes. But going the other direction is no small feat. And so what we do is we have these aerodynamic shaped vehicles that are kind of like a candy corn shape, and we come in at a really shallow angle to Earth's atmosphere, and the biggest thing that slows us down is the atmosphere itself. And so it would be like, you know, when you're skipping rocks, and if you skip a rock at a really shallow angle, but instead of skipping off the water, it goes into the water. Well, now think about something going like the speed of a bullet and then just grazing into the water, and that slowing down motion, that can be there can be a lot of vibration. It's a lot of heat. You know, we have very protective heat shields on us so that the metal doesn't melt. Only certain materials can even withstand that. In fact, in the future, when this space station is finished being used, it will come down and re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, and it will disintegrate at that point. Even with all this steel and metal that we have, there's no heat shield on it. And so it can be a pretty sporty event. And once we get through that, then we're under parachutes. And I'm sure you've seen people, you know, parachuting. That can be, you know, you can swing under the chutes, and you're feeling gravity for the first time in 6 months. So I'll have to answer that question from personal experience later, but that's what I know of it right now.
Hi, my name is Melania, and I'm a student of Coconino High School. My question is, how do bubbles act in zero gravity? Do they float in place, or do they float up and stay alive for a while?
So to answer that question, you got to think about what causes a bubble to pop on Earth. Let's say it doesn't hit anything. It still eventually pops, right? So a bubble, if you take like a soap bubble that floats in the air, it's a hollow with the soap around it. Well, eventually on Earth, the gravity will pull that soap down to the bottom of the bubble, and it pops and becomes a drip, right? Well, up here, bubbles will last longer. Now, we're in a smaller space, so it's probably more likely it would hit something, but it would actually last longer because there's no gravity that would pull the soap off of the side of that bubble. So it just kind of sits there. So that would be like a hollow soap bubble. Now, we are highly encouraged to play with our food here in space, and we like to do this because this is like physics principles in action. So let's see if I can do this without making a mess. I'll make a bubble for you. Hopefully you can see that. So surface tension right now is keeping that bubble attached to the straw. And surface tension is kind of the only thing that keeps us from being total slobs when we're eating. But if I pull that away, now it goes in whatever way the original force went because there's nothing to stop it. There's no gravity. And I better drink that before it hits something electronic. So the difference is that they will keep floating until they hit something. They will never come down.
I think we have time for one last question. No, I'm sorry. That was our last question that we had time for. Astronaut Ann McLean, thank you so much for your time and for answering our questions. Coconino High School and Flagstaff Unified School District wish you safe travels and best wishes for a successful mission on the ISS.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event.
Thank you to at all. Thank you to all participants from Coconino High School Station. We're now resuming operational audio communications.
It is nighttime at the Baikonour Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, where 2 American astronauts and a Russian cosmonaut are aboard a Soyuz spacecraft 160 feet atop a Soyuz booster, ready to launch a little more than an hour from now at 2:14 p.m. Central Time, 14 minutes past midnight local time in Baikonour on March 15th. This is a view of the International Space Station Flight Control Room here in Houston, Texas. We are looking to receive soon a live feed of the Soyuz rocket on Site 1 launch pad at Baikonour. A team of launch controllers are watching over all the systems on board the rocket, which is now fully fueled and ready to launch. No issues have been tracked throughout the day, which began with fuel and oxidizer loading around 9:14 a.m. Central Time, 7:14 p.m. out at the launch site in Baikonour, and that was completed about 2 hours ago. Good morning, everyone, from the International Space Station Flight Control Room here in Houston, Texas. I'm Gary Jordan. Behind me is a team of Orbit 2 here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room of Houston, Texas. They're working with flight control teams around the world, supporting the International Space Station program. Here in the room, Greg Whitney, Flight Director, leading the teams here, and the Capcom, Doug Wheelock, an astronaut himself, working with the crew who are now in a nap period, shifting their sleep a little bit, getting ready for the launch operations coming here in just over an hour. So again, the teams are preparing to support the transition to Expedition 59 as the station crew increases from 3 to 6 with the addition of NASA astronauts Christina Koch and Nick Hague and Russian cosmonaut and Soyuz commander Alexey Ovchinin. These three are about to begin a planned 4-orbit flight to the International Space Station with docking scheduled approximately 6 hours after launch at 8:07 p.m. Central Time, March 14th, 6:07 a.m. Friday, March 15th in Baikonour, where colleagues, friends, and family of the Soyuz crew will be watching the events unfold. Of course, this 4-orbit, 6-hour rendezvous, a little bit faster than the usual 2.5-day rendezvous, a faster mission profile that has been used over the past few years. The Soyuz MS-12 spacecraft will be docking with the Roscosmos module at the port on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the space station you can see in the back there. The crew will join the current station residents on board. That includes NASA astronaut Anne McClain, Russian cosmonaut and current space station commander Oleg Kononenko representing Roscosmos, and Canadian Space Agency astronaut David St. Jacques. They arrived at the station aboard the MS-11 spacecraft on December 3rd, 2018. Since then, they have been conducting science investigations and maintenance, even welcoming the first demonstration mission of SpaceX's Crew Dragon. Here in Houston, the team in Mission Control will be monitoring today's launch and getting updates from their flight control counterparts in Russia. Flight Director Greg Whitney, again there at the front, will be on console for the Soyuz launch. Capcom in the back during launch today will be Doug Wheelock. During Soyuz's climb to orbit, tracking and telemetry is downlinked to ground stations along the flight path and is routed to the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow. You're getting a live view from the balcony of that control center now.
19th.
During today's broadcast, if you have Soyuz launch questions that you would like answered during our show, we'll be following along using the hashtag AskNASA and bringing those in live during today's broadcast. Sending your questions on Twitter using the hashtag AskNASA, they can be answered here live today.
822 326 23 322 24.
Again, this is an overhead view from the control center just outside of Mission Control Moscow. Those teams there are looking over the launch preparations for the Expedition 59 crew, scheduled to launch today at 2:14 p.m. Central Time.
869.
Back in October of 2018, NASA astronaut Nick Hague and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexey Ovchinin had a momentary brush with space.
0.3.
Let's take a look at the events of that launch now.
On October 11th, 2018, after more than 2 years of preparation, NASA's Nick Hague and Alexey Ovchinin of Roscosmos suited up for their flight to the International Space Station. The Soyuz rocket lifted off from the Baikonour Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, and the climb to orbit went perfectly for the first 2 minutes, until one of the Soyuz rocket's strap-on boosters failed to properly separate from the rocket's first stage, triggering a launch abort. The spacecraft carrying Hague and Ovchinin pulled free from the first stage and flew on a ballistic trajectory that touched the edge of space before floating under parachutes to a safe landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan. A short time later, Hague and Ovchinin were picked up by Russian search and recovery teams, then flown back to Baikonour for a reunion with their families and greetings from NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine and the head of Roscosmos, Dmitry Rogozin, who promised the men they would be assigned to another Soyuz flight to the station. In December, the station partnership announced that Hague and Ovchinin would fly in March 2019, this time joined by NASA's Christina Koch to become a part of expeditions 59 and 60. A few weeks ago, Hague, Koch, and Ovchinin wrapped up their work at the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center in Star City, Russia, and passed their final exams, then left for Baikonour and final preparations for their launch on a 6.5-month mission to the International Space Station.
That was a look at the Expedition 59 crew members currently on board the Soyuz MS-12 spacecraft, ready to launch just over 1 hour from now, tracking down 1 hour and 7 minutes. You're getting a live view from the balcony of Mission Control Moscow. Teams there looking over the launch site out at the Baikonour Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Still tracking an on-time launch at 2:14 p.m. Central Time, 12:14 a.m. local time in Baikonour on March 15th. Again, just under an hour and 7 minutes from now. During today's broadcast, we will be answering questions online using the hashtag AskNASA, specifically about Soyuz launch. But in the meantime, we have a question from Kevin, who's asking about the recent time change. Of course, last Sunday, the clocks changed here in the United States and all across the world for daylight savings time. But what about the ISS? How does the time change, springing an hour ahead, affect the International Space Station? Any manual clock adjustments needed on board? For the crew of currently Expedition 58, who are on board now, Expedition 59 set to join them later today over the 6-hour rendezvous for orbits. The crew are on GMT time. That time does not change for daylight savings. But the teams here in Mission Control Houston did have to adjust their clocks. For the crew, they woke up at their normal time on daylight savings, and the teams here in Mission Control Houston had to shift just a bit to accommodate the new time.
11, 12, 13, 14.
Again, keep sending in your questions using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll be answering them real time during today's broadcast.
Time for in pool 1 and 2. Copy in work. All right, so we can...
Now looking at a live view of the Baikonour Cosmodrome. This is a shot of the pad, the Soyuz MS-10, currently there now, poised and ready to launch on time at 2:14 p.m. Central Time. That is 12:14 a.m. Local time in Baikonour. Currently 11:08 p.m. the night before launch for the MS-12 crew. Everything's still tracking for an on-time launch just over an hour from now.
Propulsion system parameter is 0880. Copy all, and we'll be standing by for the next reading of yours. Soyuz launch lead, this is Burlock 2. Another 5-minute measurement.
Right now you're hearing some of the English interpretation from the crew currently on board the Soyuz talking with mission controllers in Mission Control Moscow.
Pressure is 811, SR temperature is 21.5, and BO temperature is 19.9. Copy all.
Still looking at a launch time for just about an hour and 4 minutes from now of the Expedition 59 crew to the International Space Station. For the crew on board, they are using the same call sign as in the previous flight. This mission launches under the call sign Burlak, chosen by MS-12 Commander Alexey Ovchinin. It's a term that dates back to the 17th century in Russian history, meaning barge pooler, and it's the name for the worker who manually shoulders a rope to haul large vessels across a canal. The Soyuz MS-12 mission patch is strikingly similar to the Soyuz MS-10 patch, showing the Soyuz flying high above the Earth flanked by the Russian and American flags. On one side is the International Space Station, ultimate destination of the Soyuz today. On the other is the Russian and American, is the angle of the logo indicating the direction of the future human spaceflight to the moon and on to deep space. The crew members' names are displayed above the Soyuz, some in Cyrillic, given that this is a Russian mission. These elements are all set against the silhouette of an owl, symbolizing the scientific wisdom to be gained from research performed on board this orbiting laboratory. Installed on the Soyuz instrument panel during the crew's in-cabin pre-launch preparation activities last week are the talismans and zero-G indicators you might see hanging over on board the crews during ascent. One of them is a small toy dog, another, this is a dachshund, and belonging to the son of Expedition 59 Soyuz Commander Alexey Ovchinin. Then there's a pair of lucky dice from the classic 1977 space movie. This is a favorite of Nick Hague's son, specifically Han Solo's smuggler dice from the movie Star Wars. And there's also a pair of plush 8-ball ornaments from astronaut Christina Koch to commemorate the 21st astronaut class. Koch remarks, "We were given the name 8 balls per tradition from the class before us. This is the first flight with 2 class members from our class, and will join a 3rd member on board, that being Anne McLean. I am flying them because we got here as a team by supporting each other." Again, members of the 21st astronaut class selected in 2013, Christina Koch and Nick Hague currently aboard, about to join Anne McLean of the same class on board the International Space Station for Expedition 58.
Soyuz launch lead, this is Burlak 1. We have completed DSD pressure sensor check, and we have set 700. We have set this parameter on DSD, and the sensor goes off at 790. Copy all.
I'm Gary Jordan here in Mission Control Houston. We are answering Soyuz launch questions. Again, if you have one, tweet it to us using the hashtag AskNASA. We have a few great questions coming in now. One is from German, asking if the International Space Station is visible from Earth's surface. It is. Currently, the International Space Station, 257 statute miles, now over about the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But when it passes over land, it's actually one of the brightest objects in the sky. If you go to the Spot the Station website, you can type in the location of where you live and get text updates when the International Space Station is heading over your area, so you can track it across the sky. Another question from Gustavo, who's asking what experiments will they conduct during their 6 months on board the International Space Station. Typically during a 6-month stay aboard the International Space Station, currently tracking what the crew members aboard MS-12 shall be staying on the International Space Station for, there's about an average of 250 experiments. Lots of experiments for them to look forward to over these next few months. Some of them include some devices called tissue chips, that actually small thumb-sized chips that replicate the structure and function of human organs. In addition, there's going to be a new flying robot aboard the International Space Station called Astro B that should help actually alleviate some of the tasks that the crew members have to do. And again, testing those maneuvers of a free-flying robot in the microgravity environment.
The hatch leak check is complete. You're go to proceed with the spacesuits leak checks. Soyuz launch lead. This is Burlak 1. Copy all. In work. We'll proceed with the spacesuits leak check, page 28. Soyuz launch lead, copied.
Thanks for sending those. Keep sending in your questions using the hashtag AskNASA. This is a live feed of some of the activities that occurred yesterday and today. The crew was awakened about 5:14 a.m. Central Time, 3:14 p.m. local time in Baikonour, about 9 hours prior to launch. The crew members then participated in the final pre-launch activities, one of which, before departing the launch pad, the 3 crew members observed a long-standing tradition of autographing the doors of the Cosmonaut Hotel in Baikonour, Kazakhstan.
Пусть Божье благословение пребывает на вас, на ваших трудах. Пусть Пресвятая Богородица хранит вас, и ангел-хранитель всегда сопровождает вас во всех ваших делах и начинаниях.
You're seeing a priest blessing of the Expedition 59 crew, Alexey Ovchinin in the middle, flanked by NASA astronauts Nick Hague and Christina Koch. A blessing that occurs before they head out. Around 8:14 a.m. Central Time this morning, 6:14 p.m. in Baikonour, the crew departed the Cosmonaut Hotel and boarded a bus for the ride to the Integration and Suit-Up Facility at Building 254 at the Baikonour Cosmodrome. Behind them, the backup crew of Expedition 59. This song is traditionally played during the walkout to the buses. Again, those buses set to go to Building 254.
There you go. Arena first. And here we go. Awesome.
Rolex Soyuz launch lead, the camera head on.
Again, the bus departed at about 8:14 a.m. Central Time this morning, 6:14 p.m. in Baikonour. The crew then arrived at Building 254, which you're seeing right now, about 8:59 a.m. Central Time, 6:59 p.m. in Baikonour. Each crew member undergoes final medical exams and then gets suited up in the Sokol launch and entry suits, which you're seeing now. The suits were then pressurized to ensure the integrity of their seals. The actual suit-up activities began around 9:44 a.m. Central Time, 7:44 p.m. in Baikonour, about 4.5 hours prior to launch.
I'd like an upright side up though. It's upside down. They have photographic evidence of them doing that to
Put it in my shirt.
That would still
Толкает. Она просто хулиган. Бандит. Да.
Oh, it's getting too crazy now. Christina.
No.
Once the suit-up activities were completed and the pressure in the suits was verified to be airtight, the crew prepared to depart for the launch site. Beforehand, from behind a protective pane of glass, to maintain their quarantine status, the crew spoke to various Roscosmos and NASA managers, as well as their friends and family. This is the last chance for the crew to talk with everyone before they head out to the launch pad. It's a chance for each of them to relax a little bit while the others are going through the leak checks. You can see here behind the protective pane of glass, in this shot, Alexey Ovchinin, now Nick Hague, preparing to go in the seat for those final pressure checks. And their fellow crewmates will have a chance to go up to the microphone in front of the protective pane of glass and have a quick conversation before heading out to the launch pad. Standing above Nick Hague during this pressure check, Expedition 59 backup crew member Luca Parmitano of the European Space Agency.
At 6:50. 6:05.
Again, this is a chance for the crew members to speak with friends and family, the last chance they'll get before they actually head over to the launch pad and go inside the Soyuz rocket, which they are currently in. This, of course, a replay of some of today's activities. Alexey Ovchinin in the middle, flanked to his left, our right, by NASA astronaut Nick Hague.
Have to fly up to the station.
Sorry, are you planning on doing any handstands in space? It might be the easiest handstand I've ever done.
Tina Dad called and just wanted me to confirm that there will be a flight check for you.
Definitely. I made sure to tell him. I think literally the last thing I said to him was, "Don't worry, I'll wear a life jacket."
Алексей, проверка на герметичность, она благодарен.
А почему скафандр не на полный человеческий рост?
В смысле, не на полный? Чтобы в нем удобно сидеть было, чтобы лишних складок не было. Не такая была.
Say that again?
Toughest Scrabble competition.
I've been trying to recruit Scrabble players, but no one seems to be as excited about it.
Is there a Cyrillic tile set?
I think, like we said, you'll probably just feed me something I left in the cupboard. Great question, by the way.
Lieutenant Colonel Katie Hague, wife of Nick Hague, one of the last times the two will be able to speak this close to each other, of course behind a protective pane of glass to maintain their quarantine status.
Named her. Beach vacation you missed for that week of space camp. I didn't think it was possible to bring something full circle. I can now forgive you guys for going sailing without me. Thank you.
Show the ring and I'll grab a picture.
I wish you a successful completion of the entire flight program.
This is the head of Roscosmos, Dmitry Rogozin,
Wish you the best
making
of luck.
final remarks to the Expedition 59 crew in person, again behind the protective pane of glass, before they head out to the launch site.
Best of luck. May you perform the program in full and return soon. All the best to you. Thank you.
You all look like you're ready to go fly, and I can tell you the ground teams in Houston are ready, the teams in Moscow are ready to support you with all you're going to do on
Associate Administrator of Human Exploration Office, Bill Gerstenmaier, from NASA, providing some final remarks to the Expedition 59 crew. Of course, many other heads of the agency, both Roscosmos and International Space Station, present, providing last remarks after the friends and family, again before the 59 crew heads out to the launch pad.
You take care of each other.
This, of course, a replay of some of today's activities. At about 11:14 a.m. Central Time, 9:14 p.m. in Baikonour, the crew members then walked out and boarded their bus for the ride to Launch Pad 1. Waving to some of the members standing outside, photographers, media present as well.
Председатель Государственной комиссии, экипаж транспортного пилотируемого корабля Союз MS-12 к полету готов. Командир корабля.
The commander of the vehicle is reporting. The vehicle is ready and we are ready to fly. Don't worry, it's on its way. Please be careful, watch out for the bus. Here it goes.
Some of the final goodbyes before the Expedition 59 crew in their Sokol launch and entry suits heads over to the Launch Pad 1. That bus departing around 9:14 p.m. Local time in Baikonour. Again, that ride 25 minutes, arriving at the pad at 9:39 p.m. in Baikonour. showing the crew members riding up the elevator to enter into their Soyuz spacecraft where they are currently positioned. After their final goodbye, they boarded that elevator for the ride up, and now they have been there for almost 2 hours. The Soyuz rocket billowing oxygen now was fueled about 3 hours prior to launch. You're looking at a live view of the Soyuz from the launch pad. Now just under 44 minutes before launch. Liftoff scheduled on time, 2:14 p.m. Central Time, 12:14 a.m. local time in Baikonour, March 15th. We are tracking your questions on using the hashtag AskNASA. Please keep sending those in. Again, tweeting us using the hashtag at the bottom of your screen. Today's spaceflight will be the very first for NASA's Christina Koch, the second for NASA's Nick Hague, and the third for cosmonaut and Soyuz MS-12 commander Alexey Ovchinin. While at the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center in Star City, Russia, Nick Hague and Alexey Ovchinin share their thoughts on Christina joining the crew.
This time 3 with Christina. Was it easier passing the test this time around with 3 people instead of 2? I think that Christina very harmoniously entered our team. We had a lot of joint sessions, and Christina has proven herself very well, shown herself very well during the comprehensive simulations, during all of the training sessions. She always knew exactly what is happening. She always helped both me and Nick, and Christina is awesome. So I really do think that she strengthened our crew.
I also feel very fortunate to be able to have Christina as part of this second attempt. We're stronger together, and having an additional crew member, Christina is as good in the left seat as I am. And so I feel very fortunate to have her as part of the crew and look forward to flying to space with her.
Nick Hague, Christina Koch, and Expedition 59 backup crew member Drew Morgan, along with Expedition 58 flight engineer Ann McLean, were all selected to become astronauts as part of the NASA's 21st astronaut class. They participated in a 2-year, highly specialized astronaut candidate training program, which includes scientific and technical briefings, intensive instruction in International Space Station systems, spacewalks, Russian language training, robotics, physiological training, T-38 flight training, and water and wilderness survival training. The 21st astronaut class, known by the nickname 8 Balls, completed their astronaut candidate training in 2015. These 3 8 balls, along with Canadian Space Agency astronaut David St. Jacques of the 20th astronaut class, are on tap to become the Space Station Expedition 59's spacewalking team, all scheduled to occur within the next few weeks. If all goes as planned, each of these astronauts will be performing their first spacewalk this mission. Let's take a moment to learn about one of our future spacewalkers.
I first got involved in rock climbing actually in college. My college, North Carolina State University, offered rock climbing as a PE class. So it sounded really exciting, maybe a way to kind of get outside and have a little adventure. When I first got started, I liked more the physical challenge. That's what it was about. And as I kind of advanced in the hobby and got more technical, I found that I really liked other aspects of it, like the equipment, the gear, the physics of the system that you have to use, and also the partnership aspect of it. It's really like a team, because when you get into some of the higher levels of climbing and different types of more technical climbing, you really rely on your climbing partner. We train for spacewalks in a giant pool that's called the NBL, which stands for Neutral Buoyancy Lab. And it's a pool that's large enough to fit a full-scale mock-up of the International Space Station. So in that, we simulate everything like we would on a real AVA, including egressing out of the airlock, your safety tethers, and your local tethers that you would work when you're at a work site performing the job. So all of that is just very similar to the concepts of rock climbing. So during my astronaut interview, the most memorable question that I had from the interview committee came from Peggy Whitson, who, as you know, is a famous astronaut for having the longest time in space. She's done many, many spacewalks. She's a hero of mine. And she looked at me and she said, "When you rock climb, have you ever been scared?" And I felt like she was seeing right to my soul when she asked that question. And I feel like the answer to that question was absolutely, I have been scared. And that's when I really kind of found the fact that turning that fear that you might be having into focus is so important. And I think that's what she was drawing on when she asked that question. So that was a pretty profound moment in my selection process. I'm Christina Cook, and I'm an astronaut.
Be sure to follow Christina Cook on her mission using the hashtag or the Astro_Christina both on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Christina Cook was born in Michigan. She considers Jacksonville, North Carolina to be her hometown. Cook graduated from North Carolina State University with a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering and Physics and a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering. Cook worked as an electrical engineer in the Laboratory for High-Energy Astrophysics at Goddard Space Flight Center, contributing to instruments studying radiation particles for NASA missions. This includes Juno and the Van Allen probes. She then moved on to become a research associate in the United States Antarctic program, completing a winter-over season at the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station and a season at Palmer Station. Cook continued work at remote scientific bases, serving as a field engineer at NOAA's Global Monitoring Division Baseline Observatory in Barrow, Alaska, and then as station chief of the American Samoa Observatory. Here are a few more things you might not know about Christina Cook.
One thing I love is outdoor activities. I love rock climbing, surfing, camping, backpacking, anything that's a challenge that puts me in kind of a circumstance that I have to think hard to get out of or just enjoy the outdoors. So those are some of my favorite things. My favorite vacation ever is camping trips with my little sister. She's about 20 years younger than me, and we like to go out on adventures in the West, everywhere from Montana to Utah, and everywhere in between, and we just have a ball. One thing people are surprised to hear about me is that I have actually ridden a motorcycle solo across the country. The trip was from North Carolina to Montana, and I camped along the way by myself, and it was a phenomenal trip. I learned a lot about self-reliance, planning, and also just enjoyed every minute of kind of seeing the country go by. When I was in college, I was majoring in physics, and I took it upon myself to build a lightning machine, which is also known as a Tesla coil. It's a device that was invented by Nikola Tesla, and it produces actual lightning strikes that are fairly long. And I remember it was a summer project for me, and I invited a bunch of my friends over in college to check it out, and they were all completely baffled at, one, how I did it, why I chose to do it. But at the same time, I think they knew that it was near and dear to my heart. I'm kind of a geek at heart. I studied abroad in Ghana, which is in West Africa, and that trip was one of the most profound experiences of my life. It taught me the perspective that not everything that I had come to know so far in life was the same the world round, and that my experiences and my way of seeing the world was just one of many ways. And I learned about an entirely different culture and came to love it.
That was a little more on NASA astronaut Christina Cook, currently at the top of the Soyuz vehicle that you're seeing from the live view of Launchpad 1 now. She will serve alongside NASA astronaut Nick Hague, currently seated in the Soyuz vehicle as well. As we wait for their journey to the International Space Station to begin, Let's take a few moments to hear how NASA's Nick Hague got from the little town of Hoxie, Kansas, to the top of that rocket, and who he has to thank.
I grew up in western Kansas, and I love figuring out how things work. When I was young, I liked breaking things and putting them back together. My entry into aviation started as a flight test engineer. I was an engineer working in a laboratory designing satellite systems and was accepted into the Air Force Test Pilot School. But I think that the amazing experience was just the breadth of airframes that I was able to explore and to test out. Everything from the most complicated fighters that we have out there to home-built aircraft. And that diversity of exposure really scratched my engineering itch to really get an understanding of what aviation's about. So my wife and I are both graduates of the Air Force Academy. The Air Force is the only way we would have ever met. My wife is from New York, I'm from Kansas. Our paths would have never crossed, so we owe everything to the Air Force and the Air Force Academy for bringing us together. We're both in service. We're both committed to serving our country. But more importantly, I think it's committed to serving something larger than ourselves. It's all about teamwork. Every assignment I've had, I've been part of a team. And that idea of you're going to be reliant on the people around you for success and defining your success not on your accomplishments, but on the team accomplishments, that's something that Air Force instilled in me and gave me the opportunity to grow and refine. Human space exploration is the ultimate team sport. We're going to have a team of 6 people on orbit for my expeditions. We've got a team of over 100,000 people on the ground that are supporting us on a daily basis. You don't do these things individually. There's no success that's gained individually in space exploration. It's all about the team. I'm Colonel Nick Hague, and I'm a NASA astronaut.
NASA astronaut Nick Hague is a colonel in the U.S. Air Force and holds a Bachelor of Science in Astronautical Engineering from the United States Air Force Academy, as well as a Master of Science in Aeronautical and Astronautical Engineering from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Nick and his wife, U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Katie Hague, have 2 sons. As a military family, they are very familiar with the lengthy deployments of both parents and are ready to share the experience of this unique deployment together. Hague's first trip to space was aboard the abbreviated Soyuz MS-12 flight, which was aborted shortly after launch. He will once again serve alongside his Soyuz commander, Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexey Ovchinin, who is returning to space for the 3rd time today. Born in Rybinsk, Russia, Ovchinin graduated from the East Air Force Pilot School as a pilot engineer in 1992 and went on to serve as an instructor pilot. Prior to becoming a cosmonaut, Ovchinin also served as instructor pilot and then an air flight commander at the Krasnodar Aviation Institute, logging over 1,300 hours of flight time. Selected as a cosmonaut candidate in October of 2006, Ovchinin qualified as a test cosmonaut in June of 2009. He made his first spaceflight in March of 2016 as part of expeditions 47 and 48. His second flight was aboard Soyuz MS-12 with NASA astronaut Nick Hague. Quite the leader, Ovchinin has served as commander of all 3 Soyuz vehicles he has flown on, maintaining the call sign Burlock, which sticks for today's spacecraft. Ovchinin will serve as the Soyuz MS-12 commander, Space Station Expedition 59 flight engineer, and will take over command of the International Space Station from current commander Oleg Kononenko for Expedition 60. Atop the rocket and within the Soyuz MS-12 spacecraft, again, NASA's Christina Koch and Nick Hague and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexey Ovchinin, now just under 30 minutes from launch. As the clocks count down to the launch of the Soyuz MS-12 crew to the International Space Station, NASA's Nick Hague took some time during his training to weigh in on a popular space cinema debate, share his favorite flavor combos, and a few other little-known facts about himself.
So we're an Air Force family, something you may not know about us. I met my wife at the Air Force Academy back in 1996 when we were in the same squadron. I was from Kansas. She was from New York City. We never would have crossed paths hadn't been for the Air Force Academy. So a question I get all the time is, are you a Star Trek fan or a Star Wars fan? But rarely does anybody ask me about Doctor Who. And that's a show that I grew up watching on PBS when I was young, and it got me hooked into sci-fi, and I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy any type of sci-fi movie. So Doctor Who was a staple when I was growing up. Something that my wife introduced me to was yoga. And so we're regular practitioners of yoga. And I got to tell you, I am extremely thankful that she got me hooked, because being crammed up inside the descent module of the Soyuz capsule with your knees in your chest for hours on end is a lot easier after putting yourself through a few hours of torture doing yoga. I don't know if torture was the right word, but growing up in a small school, I got to play every sport. But the thing that really got me hooked and that was my passion was baseball. I was a pitcher, and so one of the things I did when I got to the Air Force Academy was walk on to the baseball team. And I played for a couple years there on the junior varsity team, and then got a chance to throw an inning at the varsity level. And then after that, they decided that my hobby was not going to go anywhere, and I got cut. So everybody has their individual tastes. When it comes to food, it's peanut butter and chocolate for me. That's an addiction I have. Who doesn't love a bowl of peanut butter and chocolate ice cream? The other thing that I really enjoy is crushed red pepper and garlic. If you put garlic on anything, it makes it taste better. So those are the things I crave when it comes to food.
That was a look at Nick Hague, who will spend about 6 months as flight engineer with the Expedition 59 and 60 crew before returning to Earth. Now back with a live view of the Soyuz on the launch pad in Baikonour, now just under 27 minutes from launch. Still on time, tracking a launch at 2:14 p.m. Central Time, 12:14 a.m. local time in Baikonour on March 15th. Welcome back to our live coverage of the launch of Christina Koch, Nick Hague, and Alexey Ovchinin, heading to the International Space Station in just under a half an hour. The launch pad service structures components have been lowered, and the clamshell gantry service towers have been retracted in preparation for liftoff at this time.
We see you on our screens.
Suit leak checks are now underway, beginning about 10 minutes ago, and the emergency escape system has been armed. This escape tower would fire in the event of a problem during the launch. The system is designed to pull the spacecraft and the crew clear of the booster, enabling the Soyuz capsule to parachute to a safe landing in the event of an emergency during the launch or early stages of the climb to orbit. As we get closer to launch, we'll see several other events unfold. At 4 minutes prior to launch, the combustion chamber nitrogen purge begins. At T-minus 2 minutes 45 seconds, booster propellant tank pressurization takes place. Events continue as the first umbilical tower separates at T-minus 35 seconds. The second umbilical tower separates at T-minus 15 seconds. At T-minus 12, the launch command will be issued, culminating in a launch of the Soyuz spacecraft as the countdown clock reaches 0 at 2:14 p.m. Central Time, 12:14 a.m. local time in Baikonour, March 15th. Again, a live view of the Soyuz MS-12 vehicle currently standing upright on Launch Pad 1 at the Baikonour Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Just about 10 minutes before midnight local time there. During the climb to orbit, tracking and telemetry from the Soyuz's vehicle is downlinked to ground stations along the flight path and is routed to the Launch Control Blockhouse near the launch pad in Baikonour, and then to the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow, an overhead view of what you're seeing now. The flight is controlled from Baikonour until the shutdown of the third stage engine, when it's transitioned to the Russian Flight Control Center. That third stage, shutting down just under the 9-minute mark. Seconds after the Soyuz reaches orbit, the vehicle's command and control systems will be activated. Stored computer commands will deploy navigation and communications antenna, and the solar arrays will be deployed to collect power for use by the onboard batteries to generate electricity for the Soyuz systems. But before that, of course, right after launch, that first stage lights for about 1 minute 58 seconds. Escape tower is jettisoned, and the launch shroud is jettisoned after the second stage. The core stage continues to fire for just about 3.5 minutes. At the 4 minute 43 mark, the third stage ignition begins. That's a 4 minute and 2 second burn, and it actually ignites before the core stage is released. This is called a hot staging technique, and helps to push away the core stage in an in-between lattice structure, which you'll see once we get to the launch portion. At the 4 minute 48 minute mark, the booster separates, and then begins that 4 minute 2 second burn to 8 minutes 45 seconds. That's a third stage shutdown and spacecraft separation. Just a few seconds later, the Soyuz spacecraft is in its preliminary orbit. Not too long after that, these solar arrays will deploy. These solar arrays at the service module section towards the bottom of the spacecraft if you were looking at it upright, and will deploy and collect solar energy for its trip to the space station over the next 6 hours. Seconds after the Soyuz reaches orbit, the vehicle's command and control system will be activated. Stored computer commands will deploy navigation and communications antennas, and again, those solar arrays will be deployed and collect power for that trip up to the International Space Station. The first antenna will be deployed to the Kurs rendezvous and docking antennas, which will be used to provide automatic range and rate of closure information on the final approach by the Soyuz for its docking with the Roscosmos module on the Earth-facing side of the International Space Station's Russian segment. Immediately after reaching orbit, the crew will oversee the programmed activation sequence of a variety of systems just before the spacecraft passes out of range of Russian ground stations. Those systems include the spacecraft's power and propulsion system, its radio communication system, and the critical motion control system. During the first orbit of today's flight, the Soyuz will automatically execute the first 2 of several orbital adjustment burns planned as the vehicle fine-tunes its path to the International Space Station. You're getting a close-up view of the Soyuz vehicle billowing oxygen from the launch pad. You can see the umbilical structures supporting the vehicle upright just to the left of the screen right there. The top of the Soyuz vehicle, at the very top you can see the pointed structure and the tower. This is the escape tower that would be used if malfunction were to occur in the first stage during its climb to orbit. This first stage burning for 1 minute 58 seconds. There's 4 strap-on boosters at the base of the vehicle. Once those are safely jettisoned after the 1 minute 58 seconds, and the core stage continues to burn as the second stage, the launch tower, the escape tower, will jettison.
Is activated on Bruce.
And the core stage will continue to provide power for the next 3 minutes, 38 seconds on ascent. Again, just coming up on 5 minutes to midnight in Baikonour there. Just under 20 minutes from launch at this time. So far, mission control teams here in Houston, as well as the flight control teams out at Moscow, and the launch support teams in Kazakhstan tracking good telemetry, still tracking for an on-time launch at 2:14 p.m. Central Time, 12:14 a.m. Local time there in Baikonour, March 15th. Three crew members on board MS-12 right now: NASA's Christina Koch, NASA's Nick Hague, and Alexey Ovchinin of Roscosmos, and the Soyuz commander for MS-12 launched today, scheduled for launch in just under 20 minutes. Soyuz rocket standing at launch pad number 1 stands 162 feet tall and weighs 680,000 pounds. Consists of the Soyuz MS-12 spacecraft inside a protective shroud at the top and a 3-stage soyuz-fg booster below. The spacecraft was mated to its booster, and the 3 main engines were joined together last week on Wednesday. The entire rocket began its trek to the launch pad just after 7 a.m. Baikonour time Tuesday, arriving less than 2 hours later, where it was raised to its vertical position for pre-launch preparations, now with this live view standing upright ready for launch. Soyuz spacecraft, with its 3 crew members on board, sits high above the 3 stages of the Soyuz booster, which uses kerosene and liquid oxygen as the propellant. Again, a little bit about the launch itself. The first stage has 4 liquid engines strapped to the side of the core vehicle. These are 4 strap-on boosters. Each will burn for about 1 minute 58 seconds before they drop away. Again, 1 minute 58 seconds of that burn. The escape tower will jettison shortly before the cutoff of those 4 strap-on boosters. There's the escape tower jettison there, and the 4 strap-on boosters will separate. The core engine will serve as the second stage, continuing from its purpose on the first stage, and continues to burn for about 4 minutes 57 seconds into the flight. The shroud will jettison, revealing the Soyuz underneath. And again, after that 4 minute 57, that 4 minute burn, the third stage will hot fire, basically firing just before the separation of the core stage. You saw the fire at that lattice structure towards the middle of the spacecraft. And then we'll continue to burn for until the 8 minute 45 second mark into the flight. And at that point, the Soyuz will be in its preliminary orbit. The entire duration of that ascent is about 8 minutes 45 seconds. A few seconds later, the solar arrays will deploy, and it will continue its 6-hour journey, 4 orbits around the Earth, to meet up with the International Space Station. Now just about 15 minutes from launch, everything tracking for an on-time liftoff today. Again, 2:15 p.m. Central Time here, 12:14 a.m. out at the launch site in Baikonour, March 15th. The Soyuz MS-12 spacecraft is scheduled to dock to the orbiting complex later today for that 4-orbit 6-hour rendezvous after today's launch. The planned one-day rendezvous will culminate with a docking to the space station's Rosviet module, scheduled for 8:07 p.m. March 14th Central Time, 4:07 a.m. March 15th in Moscow, and 6:07 a.m. March 15th in Baikonour. In Baikonour, where Russian and American dignitaries, guests, and family will be watching the events unfold from a hotel not too far from the launch site in Kazakhstan. Again, you are seeing a live view of the Soyuz MS-12 at the launch pad 1 in Baikonour. Liftoff scheduled for 12:14 p.m. Central Time, 12:14 a.m. local time in Baikonour, just under 15 minutes from now. Atop the rocket and within the Soyuz spacecraft again, NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexey Ovchinin, and commander of the spacecraft, and NASA astronaut Christina Koch. Now just under 14 minutes from launch. I'm Gary Jordan from here in Mission Control, Houston. We are answering your questions today live using the hashtag AskNASA. Please keep sending those in on Twitter with that hashtag. We have plenty of questions coming in now. This one's coming from Faye, asking, is this going to be the last time the Soyuz spacecraft is going to be used? Of course, we have an exciting year ahead of us. Even just over a week ago at this point was the successful completion of the SpaceX Demo 1 mission to demonstrate the capabilities of its future crew vehicle. Boeing's Starliner will be testing their spacecraft later this year, and then will begin a regular cadence of crewed flights to the International Space Station. This will therefore end our sole reliance on the Soyuz spacecraft, but it can be used if necessary. There's another one from Utkarsh asking, how much time will the crew take to board the International Space Station after launch? Shortly after liftoff, the scheduled docking time for the Soyuz 58 crew, the MS-12 vehicle, is scheduled to occur later tonight over the course of 6 hours. 2 hours later, the hatches will open and they'll begin and they'll enter the vehicle and provide a short welcoming ceremony, talking to friends and family on the ground, positioned in a hotel not too far from the launch site in Kazakhstan. Shortly after that, there will be a safety briefing, and then not too long after that, they'll head right to sleep. It's been a long day for the crew on board the Soyuz MS-12 vehicle, as well as the crew aboard the International Space Station, now just waking up from a short nap to help with some of those activities that'll occur aboard the International Space Station GMT time, looking to dock at about shortly after 1 in the morning their time. So they'll be shifting their schedule. Again, keep sending in those great questions using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll be answering them live here during today's coverage. Again, Soyuz MS-12 situated there at the launch pad just over 10 minutes from launch. The whole Soyuz spacecraft is 23.5 feet long, weighs 15,650 pounds, and comprises of 3 separate modules. The descent module, situated in the middle of the Soyuz vehicle, contains customized seats for the crew members during launch, entry, and landing. It contains all the controls and displays necessary for the flight. It also contains life support systems, batteries for re-entry and landing, and the parachutes and soft landing rocket engines to slow down the Soyuz just before touchdown when the Soyuz lands in the steppes of Kazakhstan. There are 8 hydrogen peroxide thrusters located on the module that are used to control the spacecraft's orientation or attitude during the descent until parachute deployment. It also has guidance, navigation, and control system to maneuver the vehicle during mainly the descent phase of the mission. The descent module weighs 6,393 pounds with a habitable volume of 141 cubic feet. Approximately 110 pounds of payload can be returned to Earth in this module. The descent module is the only portion of the Soyuz that survives the return to Earth. The orbital module at the top connects the descent module via a pressurized hatch you see opening now during this clip. It's where the crew has a small amount of room to move around during the flight to the station. Has a volume of 230 cubic feet with a docking mechanism, hatch, and rendezvous antennas located at the front end. The docking mechanism is used to dock with the space station, and the hatch allows entry into the orbiting complex. The rendezvous antennas are used by the automated docking system, which uses radar to maneuver towards the station for docking. There is also a forward-looking window into the module that the crew can use to take manual measurements of distance and closing speed with a laser rangefinder in the event of a failure of the rendezvous radar system. The essential propulsion module houses the oxygen storage tanks, the main engine, the attitude control thrusters, avionics, and communications and control equipment. The propulsion portion of this module handles all the orbital maneuvers, including those needed for the rendezvous with the space station and the deorbit burn at the end of the spacecraft's mission. Before they are deployed, the two solar arrays are folded against the body of the propulsion module, which separates from the descent module after the deorbit burn, along with the orbital module. The solar panels span almost 35 feet. The entire spacecraft serves not only as a crew transport vehicle to and from the International Space Station, but also as an emergency return vehicle in the event the crew should have to leave the station unexpectedly.
This is Berlock 1. We can't hear the music.
Back at the launch site, the launch vehicle's control systems are being prepared, and the gyros were just activated a few minutes ago. A group of NASA representatives is there in Baikonour, just a short distance away from the launch pad. For an update on activities there, let's go now to NASA Public Affairs Officer Rob Navius.
Gary, 5 months have passed since that day in October when Nick Hague and Alexey Ovchinin endured the launch abort that triggered a plethora of replanning by NASA, Roscosmos, and the rest of the international partnership. Today it is take two for Hague and Ovchinin as an astronaut and cosmonaut who have trained together for 2.5 years prepare to complete their journey to the International Space Station, this time along with NASA crewmate Christina Koch. A large throng of VIPs and family members are on hand today, NASA represented by Bill Gerstenmaier, the Associate Administrator for Human Exploration. The ISS program is represented by Deputy Program Manager Joel Montalbano. This launch comes less than 2 weeks after the inaugural flight of the SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft that ushered in the commercial crew program era, and a little over a week before the start of a trio of spacewalks by 4 astronauts to continue upgrades to the station's power and communication systems. Today's launch to finally bring Hague and Ovchinin to the station has also brought an air of anticipation here at the launch site. It's an exercise in reprise rocketry, the stage set for a skylighting show on this midnight ride to the international outpost. That's it from the Baikonour Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Now back to you at Mission Control in Houston.
Thank you, Rob. We are now just under 7 minutes from launch. Pre-launch operations are complete at this time. At this point in the countdown, the Soyuz's first and second stage engines are ready for launch, and telemetry has been received from the rocket indicating that all primary and backup systems are ready for launch. Not too long ago, the crew aboard the MS-12 vehicle, a live view that you're seeing now, waving and giving good vibes that the crew on board are feeling good this close to launch. The launch of Soyuz MS-12 is timed precisely for the moment when the Earth's rotation will place the Baikonour Cosmodrome in the plane of the orbit of the International Space Station. Now under 6 minutes from launch. At this time, the launch key has been inserted into the launch bunker. It's a real key, and it transitions the vehicle into launch sequence into automatic mode. In-cabin views of the Soyuz MS-12 crew shaking hands just here about 5 minutes from launch.
Launch key inserted.
At this point, the onboard systems will be getting to switch to onboard control. The commander's cockpit displays and controls will be activated, and the crew members are closing their helmets, putting the suits on oxygen. At 4 minutes 13 seconds now from launch, the space station is flying directly over the Baikonour Cosmodrome. On time for a launch just 4 minutes from now.
Combustion chamber nitrogen purge.
You're hearing the calls from Mission Control Moscow. Good purge, all the milestones counting down to an on-time launch being conducted so far. The fuel lines and other elements of the rocket engines purged with nitrogen basically to fireproof them by removing vapors of fuel and oxidizer.
Ground measurement systems activated by Run 2 command. Oxidizer and fuel drain and safety valves of launch vehicle are closed.
The crew members in position about 3 minutes from launch, about T-minus 2 minutes 45 seconds. The booster tank will begin being pressurized for flight, and this will help optimize the flow of fuel and helps to add structural support to the rocket just before launch.
Booster propellant tank pressurization initiated. Launch lead, this is Burlock 1. We are ready for the launch. And we are ready for the liftoff at 22:14:08. Copy all. This is launch lead.
Everything on track so far. Just over 2 minutes from launch, about 30 more seconds, the ground propellant feed will be terminated. And the Soyuz will be switched to internal power shortly after that. One minute 45 seconds from flight, or from launch. The umbilical towers, you can see, will be retracted here soon in the next minute. Soyuz vehicle now 1 minute from launch. A close-up view of the top of the vehicle, you'll see the first umbilical tower separate, beginning to separate right now. Vehicle on internal power. Now just under 30 seconds from launch. Ground
onboard power. Launch command issued for ignition.
Launch command has been issued. Second umbilical tower separated. Booster ignition.
Engine turbo pumps at flight speed. Engines at maximum thrust, liftoff.
And liftoff. We have liftoff of Nick Hague, Christina Koch, and Alexey Ovchinin, now on their way to the International Space Station.
10 seconds, the parameters are nominal. This is Burlock 1, everything's
Good first stage performance so far. The Soyuz delivering 930,000 pounds of thrust from its 4 boosters and single engine. The first stage of the Soyuz measures 68 feet in length, 24 feet in diameter, burning liquid fuel for the first 2 minutes, 6 seconds of the flight.
Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling great. Seconds, the vehicle is stable. Copy all. This is Burlock 1. Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling very well.
One minute into the flight, everything looking good so far. The vehicle itself is now traveling at more than 1,000 miles per hour.
Is a nominal. Copy all. This is Burlock 1. Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling well.
As we lose sight of the vehicle, transitioning to an animation, everything looking good so far. This first stage with the 4 strap-on boosters will continue to burn until 1 minute 58 seconds.
80 seconds, everything is nominal. Copy all. The crew is feeling great, everything is nominal on board.
Good reports to the crew. About 10 more seconds of this first stage.
Thermal control system parameters are nominal. Copy all. Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling well.
Good call that the escape tower has been jettisoned. On time, the 4 booster separations have been confirmed. That core stage continuing on as the second stage. The launch shroud will be jettisoned at 2 minutes 37 seconds into the flight.
The crew is feeling great.
Soyuz vehicle traveling well over 3,000 miles per hour.
140 seconds. The launch vehicle parameters are nominal. Copy all. Everything is nominal on board.
Good core stage performance. The launch shroud has been jettisoned. The rocket is now at 48 miles high.
The Display 5 control descent display has been activated, illuminated. Copy all. 180 seconds. The vehicle is stable.
Good reports so far. This core stage will continue to burn until the 4 minute 43 second mark.
The crew is feeling great.
Good reports from the crew. Over 3 minutes from launch, the Soyuz vehicle traveling about 5,000 miles per hour.
200 seconds. Second stage.
Soyuz core stage is performing as expected. That core stage, 56 feet in length, 13.5 feet in diameter, with a single engine and 4 fuel chambers, providing between 178,000 and 222,000 pounds of thrust for its 3 minute 28 second burn. This stage will continue to burn until the 4 minute 43 second mark. The Soyuz uses what's called a hot staging technique. The third stage will ignite while the second is still burning.
Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling well.
It'll happen in that lattice structure you see at the center of the vehicle of this animation. Over 4 minutes into the flight, everything looking good so far.
.250 seconds. Your pitch roll are nominal. Everything is nominal on board.
Four and a half minutes into the flight, everything looking good. About 15 seconds until the ignition of that third stage. Good separation of that second stage.
Second stage separation is confirmed. This is Burlock 1. I confirm that. Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling great. .310 seconds. The spacecraft is stable.
Good third stage performance. Everything looking good. This booster will continue to burn until the 8 minute 45 second mark. Just over a 4 minute burn.
330 seconds.
At this time, the Soyuz vehicle well over 100 miles above the Earth.
This is Burlock 1. Copy all. Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling well.
The single engine of the Soyuz's third stage, providing 67,000 pounds of thrust, again burns until the 8-minute 45-second mark into the flight. Now just over 6 minutes after launch.
360 seconds. Your pitch roll are nominal. Copy all. This is Burlock 1. Everything is nominal on board.
Six minutes, 30 seconds into the flight, crew feeling good. Everything looking good so far for this last stage before the Soyuz itself is inserted into orbit. 8 minutes, 45 seconds after launch.
400 seconds. The spacecraft is stable. Copy all. Everything is nominal on board, and the crew is feeling great. This is Burlock 1. Copy all.
Over 7 minutes into the flight.
.430 seconds. Third stage thrusters are operating nominally. Copy all. This is Burlock 1. Everything is nominal on board, and the crew is feeling great. We are standing by for third stage separation at 22:56. Copy all.
Everything looking good. 7 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight. At this time, the Soyuz vehicle traveling well over 13,500 miles per hour. Once the third stage delivers the Soyuz to orbit and the module is separated, a series of pre-programmed commands will be executed to prepare the Soyuz for orbital operations. These stored commands, called time-tagged commands, allow many of the Soyuz's systems to be automatically activated by onboard computers at precise times stored in those computers.
Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling great. This is Burlock 1.
About 30 more seconds of this third stage burn and separation.
500 seconds. The flight is nominal. Everything is nominal on board. Burlock 1.
We have good third stage separation.
Third stage separation is confirmed.
Stage cutoff and separation occurring.
Burlocks, congratulations on the insertion, orbit insertion. Mission Control Moscow is standing by, and they're here.
The cruise antenna has deployed at this time.
Burlocks, Moscow, how copy? Moscow, this is Burlock 1. Have you loud and clear?
At this time, all the antennas and solar arrays are deployed.
Third stage separation was nominal. Everything is nominal on board, and we are feeling great. Copy all. We are working from page 35 of the Soyuz ODF. Copy. We are closing both RPVs, the airflow regulators, and we are controlling the TS indicator panels. We are standing by for your first measurement as part of leak checks. This is Burlock 1, copy all, Moscow.
Soyuz now in orbit, solar arrays deployed, and the Soyuz crew on their way to the International Space Station, docking just 6 hours from now. The Soyuz itself orbiting at an altitude of about 143 miles by 118 miles. The orbit will be raised systematically over the course of the next 2 days, placing it in close proximity to the International Space Station. systematically over the next 6 hours. The control of the spacecraft from here will be overseen from Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow, a view of what you're seeing now.
4 SR pressure, BO pressure, 812. 856. How copy? Copy all. Burlux, did the air go through? Moscow, this is Burlux.
Again, the great launch of the Soyuz MS-12 crew, launching on time at 2:14 p.m. Central Time, 12:14 out at the launch site in Baikonour, March 15th. Everything looking good so far for the crew's trip to the International Space Station. A textbook ascent, and the Soyuz is in orbit, solar arrays deployed, and the crew is on their way, going to be docking later tonight, Central Time.
Affirmative. You will need to deactivate that.
We will be replaying some views of that launch for you, but as we are waiting for those to come in, please keep sending in your questions using the hashtag AskNASA.
Burlux.
We have a question from Andre, who's asking, what are the astronauts doing right now? You're hearing some of the English translation now during this broadcast as the Soyuz commander Alexey Ovchinin continues to work through some of those procedures for the flight of the Soyuz to the International Space Station. The Soyuz itself will be in communication with ground teams as long as the Soyuz is flying over those Russian ground stations in the northern hemisphere.
Of the second set, of course.
The International Space Station, currently 254 statute miles over the Pacific Ocean just east of Japan. The Soyuz, you can see right behind it on this map, going to be chasing it down over the next 6 hours. The crew on board the International Space Station, just waking up, and of course watching the launch of their crewmates.
Yes. 17.
They'll continue.
18, 17,
they have shifted their day to accommodate the arrival of the crew just 6 hours from now.
21.3.
You can tune in to our docking coverage at 8:45 p.m. Eastern Time, 7:45 p.m. Central. Docking is scheduled to be at 9:07 p.m. Eastern, 8:07 Central.
17.5, 26, 370. 8.
Follow along on Facebook, NASA.gov, and NASA TV, wherever you are watching around the world. In the meantime, we have questions continuing to come in. Another one from Ray asking, does the Soyuz capsule have rockets that propel it away from the booster in case of an emergency? Of course, during the ascent, that first stage with the 4 strap-on boosters burns for about 1 minute and 58 seconds. Just before the end of that burn, the escape tower that's at the very top of the vehicle is jettisoned. In the event of an emergency, that launch escape tower would pull the crew away from the speeding rocket and land the crew safely in the steppes of Kazakhstan. Of course, 2 crew members on board MS-12 today, Nick Hague and Alexey Ovchinin, witnessed that themselves during the abort shortly after launch of the MS-10 vehicle in October 2018.
Next compass, we will be performing the manual test and.
Another question from John. How fast is the International Space Station traveling while orbiting the Earth? A great question. The Soyuz vehicle went from 0 to 17,500 miles per hour in just about 9 minutes, about how fast the International Space Station is traveling. Over the next 6 hours, it'll get incrementally higher and higher, basically chasing down the International Space Station for an on-time docking 6 hours from now, 8:07 p.m. Central Time. During that time, as the vehicle is traveling that fast, the International Space Station and the Soyuz vehicle will make 4 orbits around the Earth.
2346. When is the next compass? 2346. Copy 2346.
Another question from Anne. What new scientific research are playing in the field of biology at the International Space Station? Over these past few weeks, there have been 3 crew members on board conducting experiments in all different kinds of fields. One particular experiment going on right now is the VEG-3 experiment. In this experiment, the International Space Station crew is growing various types of lettuce to see how it grows in the microgravity environment, with different pillows or cases that provide nutrients, different lighting, basically maximizing how you can grow food in space in the event of long duration stays on other planets. Of course, the Expedition 59 crew will be conducting a series of biological experiments during their stay on board. One in particular is something called tissue chips. These are small thumb drive-sized devices that mimic the structure and function of human organs, being tested in space to see how the structure of whichever organ or tissue of the human body being replicated on those devices changes over time in space.
We have the angular build, and I am ready to send GEA-3 command. It's a go to send. At 22:31:08, the GEA-3 or GOL-3 command is sent. Now, what about LED? Is it on? Yes, the LED of this command is illuminated now. Copy, that's great news.
You're getting a live look from the balcony of Mission Control Center just outside of Moscow. Teams here are monitoring the Soyuz vehicle, still in communication with the Mission Control Moscow. You're hearing those calls over the television live as the Soyuz vehicle travels just over eastern Russia, at this time still in the range of some of those ground stations that are providing communication to the teams there in Moscow.
1.6, the period 88.8, the minimal altitude 199, and
the crew of Expedition 59 has successful launch at 2:14 p.m. Central Time today. Now, just about 18 minutes into their journey to the International Space Station, which will take just about 6 hours. Docking time at 8:07 p.m. Central Time this evening. From there, it'll take about 2 hours for them to open the hatches, where they will be welcomed by the then Expedition 59 crew currently aboard. Expedition 59 will formally begin once the Soyuz MS-12 vehicle docks to the Roscosmos module of the International Space Station.
Please proceed with your flight, and I wish you successful docking. Thank you so much. Everything is good on the board.
We are currently waiting for launch replays that occurred just about 19 minutes ago.
Thank you so much.
In the meantime, continue to send in questions online using the hashtag AskNASA. We're following along and answering those live. We have one question from Noni, who's asking, good luck and safe journey to the crew of Expedition 59. If in the event of one crew member falling ill, will he or she be replaced? If you were tuning into our broadcast that occurred just before launch, we were on for about an hour. We were playing replaying some of the events that occurred just before the launch today. Expedition 59 crew members going through their pre-launch preparations, suiting up in the so-called launch and entry suits and providing leak checks. Next to them at the time was the Expedition 59 backup crew. Of course, about providing support along the way in a quarantined environment to remove them from any potential of falling ill. In the instance that a crew member did fall ill, a member of the backup crew will be able to replace them shortly before launch. But of course, on launch day, everybody reported healthy and went about a normal pre-launch preparation activities. Another question from Jacob, how long will launch take? The crew sits on the pad after ascending through the elevator just next to the Soyuz and gets situated in their seats a few hours before launch. The launch itself is about a 9-minute climb from the time it lifts off from the pad in Baikonour to the time it's inserted into orbit. This is a fast-track rendezvous for the Soyuz vehicle, sometimes taking 2.5 days to rendezvous with the International Space Station, in this instance taking just 6 hours and 4 revolutions around the Earth. So from the time that the Soyuz vehicle is lifted from the pad to the time that they are opening the hatches and entering the International Space Station for the first time, that whole time takes just around 8 hours. This next question comes from Justin, who's asking, what will happen with the spacecraft after docking with the International Space Station? Soyuz vehicle scheduled to dock to the Rosviet module at 8:07 p.m. Central Time today. After it's docked, it takes about 2 hours from the time that it actually docks to the International Space Station to the time it opens up the hatches. Once it docks, it's basically pulled into the International Space Station and secured with latches. The crew, both on the Soyuz side and the International Space Station side, will perform leak checks. Once everything is secure, the crew inside the Soyuz vehicle will get out of their Sokol launch and entry suits and change into their flight suits. All of this takes about 2 hours to safely make sure that everything is good before they open up the hatches just 2 hours later. Again, you're getting a live look from the balcony of Mission Control Moscow, a Mission Control Center just outside of the city of Moscow, Russia. Teams here still being able to communicate with the Soyuz crew on board MS-12, now tracking just east of Japan towards the edge of the coverage of some of those Russian ground stations. Everything looked good. It was a textbook launch at 2:14 p.m. Central Time. Everything performed nominally until just 9 minutes later, the Soyuz was inserted into orbit. Solar panels were deployed, and the crew is safely on their way to the International Space Station. Will begin incrementally raising their orbit to meet up with the space station just 6 hours from now. In the meantime, we are taking your questions live using the hashtag AskNASA. Keep sending those in. This next question comes from Tobo, who's asking, which countries currently have astronauts on the International Space Station? Right now, aboard the International Space Station, Expedition 58 crew members include NASA astronaut Anne McLean, Canadian Space Agency astronaut David Senjak, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Kononenko, representing 3 countries from around the world. Expedition 59 will formally begin just about 6 hours from now when the Soyuz vehicle docks to the Rosviet module of the International Space Station. In the vehicle is NASA's Nick Hague, NASA's Christina Koch, and Alexey Ovchinin of Roscosmos. When the crew is together to form Expedition 59, once the hatches are open just about 8 hours from now, there'll be 3 crew members from the United States, NASA, 1 from the Canadian Space Agency, and 2 from Russia, representing the space agency Roscosmos. Soyuz MS-12 vehicle just over 25 minutes into its flight, tracking over the Pacific Ocean now. About to cross over the range of some of those Russian ground stations. You'll start to hear the calls from those crews get a little bit silent as they get away from those Russian ground stations. Get closer to the International Space Station, where communication will resume once it's within range. In the meantime, you're getting a live view from the balcony of Mission Control Moscow, who was communicating with the MS-12 crew during the launch and ascent of the vehicle into orbit. Everything looking good so far for that vehicle. An on-time docking scheduled just 6 hours from now. Currently waiting for launch replays to start rolling in. Coming up next, we'll go live with the docking coverage scheduled at 7:45 p.m. Central Time. Just about 20 minutes before the crew is scheduled to dock. Again, 8:07 p.m. Central Time. In the meantime, while we are waiting for some of those replays of the launch, keep sending in your questions using the hashtag AskNASA. Some great questions so far. This one comes from James. What will the spacewalkers be doing? Of course, 3 crew members on board MS-12 now. Alexey, Ovchinin, Nick Hague, and Christina Koch. Nick Hague and Christina Koch will consist of half of the spacewalking team of the next 3 spacewalks scheduled over the next few weeks. The other 2 being NASA's Anne McClain and David Saint-Jacques of the Canadian Space Agency. These 3 spacewalks will take place over the next few weeks. The first 2 are scheduled to be conducted to basically replace batteries on the outside of the space station. The batteries they are replacing are nickel-hydrogen batteries. They'll replace them with lithium-ion. Basically, one lithium-ion battery can replace 2 nickel-hydrogen batteries. Those delivered on the Japanese HTV vehicle last year. The final spacewalk will be routing redundant power to the Canadian robotic arm, the Canadarm2, that serves as the mechanism to capture cargo vehicles to the International Space Station and served a great deal of responsibility in the construction of the orbiting complex. This next question comes from John. John is asking if the crew members of the Soyuz launch have time to take off their pressure suits before docking. Once the Soyuz vehicle docks to the International Space Station, the vehicle itself will be pulled in by some of the mechanisms that secure the docking. And it takes about 2 hours from the time of docking to the time they actually open up the hatches. In this time frame is a series of leak checks to just make sure that everything is good between the Soyuz vehicle and the International Space Station. After these leak checks are done and before the hatch is opened, the crew will have the time to get out of their seats, change out of their pressure suits, and into flight suits. Make sure to tune in to our coverage of hatch opening and welcome at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. This will come a bit early compared to the hatch opening itself, which will happen closer to approximately 10 p.m. Central. You'll see the crew members get out in their flight suits, take a few moments to get set up, and they'll begin a short welcoming ceremony to welcome the 3 new crew members aboard the International Space Station and have a chance to talk with friends and family that are currently positioned, that will be at the time, positioned in a hotel in Kazakhstan, not too far from the launch site that they lifted off from once the hatch opening ceremony resumes 8 hours prior. You're getting a live view. You're getting a live view of the balcony of the Mission Control Moscow. Very shortly here, we'll start to resume replays of the launch activities that occurred just about a half an hour ago. Those were some launch replays of the Soyuz MS-12 vehicle that lifted off on time, 2:14 p.m. Central Time, 12:14 a.m. local time out in Baikonour, March 15th. The Soyuz vehicle and the International Space Station tracking over the Pacific Ocean at this time. Space Station 261 statute miles over the southern Pacific Ocean. 37 minutes just past launch. It'll take about 6 hours for the Soyuz vehicle to catch up with the International Space Station. You can tune into our coverage of the docking and the hatch opening of the Soyuz MS-12 vehicle to the International Space Station coming up here later tonight. Our coverage will begin for Soyuz MS-12 docking at 7:15 p.m. Docking is scheduled to occur at about 8:07 p.m. Central Time. We'll begin hatch opening coverage at 9:30 for a hatch opening scheduled around 10:05 p.m. Central. Then a video file of all events to occur at 1 a.m. A successful launch of the Expedition 59 crew, Nick Hague, Christina Koch, and Alexey Ovchinin on their way to the International Space Station. In the meantime, we'll take a quick break as they begin their 4-orbit travel around the Earth to catch up with the International Space Station and be back with you live at 7:15 p.m. Central Time for the docking coverage. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then. This is Mission Control Houston. 1 minute 45 seconds from flight, or from launch. The umbilical towers, you can see, will be retracted here soon in the next minute. Soyuz vehicle now 1 minute from launch. A close-up view of the top of the vehicle, you'll see the first umbilical tower separate, beginning to separate right now. Vehicle on internal power. Now just under 30 seconds from launch. Ground
onboard power. Launch command issued for ignition.
Launch command has been issued. Second umbilical tower separated. Booster ignition.
Engine turbo pumps at flight speed. Engines at maximum thrust, lift off.
And liftoff. We have liftoff of Nick Hague, Christina Koch, and Alexey Ovchinin, now on their way to the International Space Station.
10 seconds, the parameters are nominal. This is Burlock 1, everything's
Good first stage performance so far. The Soyuz delivering 930,000 pounds of thrust from its 4 boosters and single engine. The first stage of the Soyuz measures 68 feet in length, 24 feet in diameter, burning liquid fuel for the first 2 minutes 6 seconds of the flight.
Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling great. Seconds, the vehicle is stable. Copy all. This is Burlock 1. Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling very well.
One minute into the flight, everything looking good so far. The vehicle itself is now traveling at more than 1,000 miles per hour.
Is a nominal. Copy all. This is Burlock 1. Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling well.
As we lose sight of the vehicle, transitioning to an animation, everything looking good so far. This first stage with the 4 strap-on boosters will continue to burn until 1 minute 58 seconds.
80 seconds, everything is nominal. Copy all. The crew is feeling great, everything is nominal on board.
Good reports to the crew. About 10 more seconds of this first stage.
Thermal control system parameters are nominal. Copy all. Everything is nominal on board. The crew is feeling well.